On October 14, 1943, at 15,000 feet over Schweinfurt, Germany, a German fighter pilot added another entry in his logbook. He recorded his 17th heavy bomber kill. It was a B-17 Flying Fortress that spiraled down, trailing black smoke in despair. From the cockpit of his Focke-Wulf 190, he watched the remaining bombers struggle to maintain their formation. The gunners on the bombers fired futilely at the empty sky where German fighters had just been. Aerial combat was merciless and direct. German fighters chose their moments to attack, often striking from above and retreating before the bombers could respond. Without fighter escorts, American bombers were just expensive targets. That morning, 291 B-17 Flying Fortresses entered German airspace, aiming for the ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt. By sunset, 60 of those bombers would not return to England. Another 17 would be so damaged they would be considered total losses upon landing. The Luftwaffe referred to it as a turkey shoot. The Americans labeled it Black Thursday, marking it as the darkest day in the history of the 8th Air Force. What neither side realized was that this German victory would soon be one of their last. In the following 4 months, everything would change. German fighter pilots in late 1943 felt a strong sense of confidence. Pilots like Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, Adolf Hedman, Georg Peter Adar, and Major Walter Daw had turned intercepting American bombers into a lethal skill. They developed tactics that exploited the weaknesses of bomber formations refined through successful engagements. The standard American combat box formation consisted of 18 to 21 bombers arranged defensively to protect against fighter attacks with overlapping firepower. Each B-17 was armed with 1350 caliber machine guns designed to cover all attack angles. However, German pilots discovered significant weaknesses, including blind spots, limited ammunition, and the unsettling impact of sustained enemy attacks. Headman Heinz Knoke, commanding 5 fast JG-11, mastered head-on attacks that exploited the B-17's most vulnerable defensive position. He shot down his first heavy bomber, a B-24 Liberator named Maisie, and by October he had destroyed 16 more. His technique was precise. He would approach from above, dive through the formation at 400 miles per hour, shoot a quick burst at the cockpit and engines, and then pull away before the bombers could retaliate. The top turret gunners had little chance to react. Statistics demonstrated the Germans' confidence. On August 17, 1943, during the first Schweinfurt mission, the Luftwaffe shot down 60 bombers. That represented 16% of the attacking force. American losses were so severe that deep penetration raids were paused for weeks. When these raids resumed with the second Schweinfurt raid on October 14th, the losses were even greater. 77 bombers were lost or written off, while more than 600 airmen were killed or captured in just one day. Major Gasp, the group commander of the 2-squadron JG-11, implemented a frontal attack strategy. 8 Focke-Wulf 190s approached in a tight formation, overwhelming the bombers' defensive fire by presenting multiple targets at once. The psychological impact was intense. American gunners facing 8 fighters charging in at 600 miles per hour had only seconds to decide their targets. Many ended up shooting at nothing out of panic. The root cause of the American vulnerability was simple physics. No Allied fighter in 1943 could escort bombers deep into Germany. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the leading American escort fighter, had a combat radius of only 375 miles with drop tanks. This range allowed it to reach the German border, but not beyond. The twin-engine Lockheed P-38 Lightning could fly farther, but it faced mechanical issues at high altitudes in the cold European climate. Engines would fail, and controls would freeze. This limitation meant American bombers had to fly through the most dangerous parts of their missions over Germany's heart, completely alone. German fighters waited, just beyond the range of Allied escorts, then attacked with concentrated force. Luftwaffe pilots called the point where Allied fighters turned back the golden moment. Pilot Hans Philipp, who claimed 206 victories before his death in October 1943, detailed the tactic in recorded statements. "We tracked the bomber streams on radar, calculating exactly where their escorts would turn back. The moment the little friends left, we attacked. The bombers understood what was coming. You could see their formations tighten. This escort limitation created a perilous situation. A B-17 formation might endure 4 hours of combat over enemy territory, yet it only took 90 minutes of fighter protection for the American bombers. During this time, German fighters could attack, land, refuel, and rearm. They could launch new assaults while the bombers struggled to return home. Luftwaffe pilots flew 3 or 4 missions during a single raid, their combat effectiveness. The P-51 Mustang's development did not start as an American project. It began with a request from Britain. In April 1940, the British Purchasing Commission contacted North American Aviation for more P-40 fighters. Instead, North American proposed building an entirely new fighter in just 120 days. This resulted in the creation of the NA-73X, which took to the skies on October 26, 1940. This achievement showcased rapid development. The early Mustang had an Allison 1710 engine. It performed well at low altitudes but faced challenges above 15,000 feet, where bomber escort was crucial. The Royal Air Force deployed these early models for tactical reconnaissance and ground assaults. Their impressive range and low-altitude performance proved advantageous in these tasks. A significant change in the air war came from a collaboration between American and British engineers. In April 1942, Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang with an Allison engine. He quickly saw its potential. The airframe was excellent, more aerodynamic than the Spitfire. However, it required a stronger engine. Harker recommended equipping the Mustang with the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61 engine. This engine was the same 2-stage supercharged model used in the latest Spitfires. The first Mustang with the Merlin engine took flight in October 1942, and the results were remarkable. Maximum speed jumped from 390 to 440 miles per hour. Performance above 20,000 feet went from acceptable to outstanding. The service ceiling increased from 31,000 to 42,000 feet. The combination of American mass production and British engine technology created something neither could achieve independently. The P-51B was revolutionary not only for its performance, but also for its incredible range. This was due to 3 main factors. It featured exceptional aerodynamic efficiency from its laminar-flow wing, an internal fuel capacity of 184 gallons compared to the P-47's 305 gallons, all in a much lighter airframe. Additionally, it could carry external drop tanks without significant performance loss. The laminar-flow wing, designed by Yeager at North American, maintained smooth airflow much farther back than traditional wings, dramatically reducing drag. This improvement translated to nearly 30% in fuel efficiency. While a P-47 consumed 100 gallons per hour during cruise, the P-51 was much more efficient. During a flight, a P-51 used only 65 gallons at the same speed. When they added 75-gallon drop tanks to the P-51B in early 1944, its combat radius expanded to 650 miles. With the introduction of 108 tanks in March 1944, the radius grew to 850 miles. This allowed the aircraft to reach Berlin, engage in combat for 20 minutes, and then return to England. No other single-engine fighter in the world could match this range and performance combination. The 354th Fighter Group, known as the Pioneer Mustang Group, received the first P-51Bs in November 1943. They were based at Boxstead in Essex and were technically part of the 9th Air Force. However, they were quickly assigned to support 8th Air Force strategic bombing missions. Their commander, Colonel Kenneth Martin, had only a few days to transition his pilots from P-47s to the new fighter. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Duncan, who would later lead the 353rd Fighter Group, flew one of the first orientation flights. He remembered that as soon as he lifted off, he felt they had something special. The Mustang handled like a sports car compared to the Thunderbolt. It was responsive, fast, and most importantly, it could fly for a long time. The first P-51B combat mission took place on December 1, 1943. It involved a fighter sweep over Belgium and France. The first escort mission happened on December 5th to Ammon. This mission was a short-range raid. 16 P-51Bs accompanied the bombers, functioning more as a combat test than a full escort mission. They encountered no enemy fighters, but the mission showed the aircraft's capability for high-altitude escort operations. On December 13th, they completed the first long-range escort mission to Kiel at 490 miles from their base, which had previously been impossible for Allied fighters. The psychological impact on both sides was immediate. German pilots who expected to intercept unescorted bombers over northern Germany were shocked to face aggressive American fighters deep in their territory. The last week of 1943 saw increased operations as the 8th Air Force tested the Mustang's capabilities. On December 20th, P-51Bs escorted bombers to Bremen, claiming 3 German fighters without suffering any losses. The Luftwaffe, still adjusting to this new threat, continued using their standard tactics of waiting for escorts to leave. However, the escorts were not departing. German pilots initially mistook the P-51B for the P-47 at a distance, expecting them to turn back at any moment. As the Mustangs flew east, past the maximum range of the P-47s, confusion swiftly turned to alarm. Allied intelligence intercepted radio communications where German controllers were frantically asking pilots to identify their aircraft and positions. They could hardly believe that Allied escorts had penetrated so deep into Germany. Major Klaus Mitusch, the leader of 3JG-26, recognized the strategic implications immediately after landing following an interception on December 30th. The Mustangs had followed his fighters all the way to their landing approach. He reportedly cautioned his pilots, saying, "The air war has fundamentally changed. Our sanctuary no longer exists." On March 4, 1944, at 25,000 feet above Brandenburg, the vast silhouette of Berlin emerged through the scattered clouds. This was the capital of the Reich and the heart of Nazi Germany, a city that Hermann Göring had sworn would never see enemy aircraft. Above it flew 660 American heavy bombers in perfect formation. Surrounding them were numerous single-engine fighters marked with American insignia, weaving protective patterns. This marked the first American fighter escort to Berlin, symbolizing more than just a tactical victory. It dealt a psychological blow to the myth of German invincibility. Colonel Donald Blakey, who led the 4th Fighter Group, commanded his 3 squadrons of P-51B Mustangs on this historic round trip. The 4th Fighter Group had received their P-51Bs on February 28, 1944, and just 4 days later, they achieved what German leadership believed was impossible. For the Luftwaffe pilots that rose to intercept, the situation was remarkable. They had been told that Allied fighters could never reach Berlin because of the distance. Yet there they were, fresh and eager after flying 500 miles while German defenders struggled with fuel after just taking off. Intense combat followed. The Luftwaffe committed over 200 fighters to defend Berlin. However, they did not confront exhausted bomber gunners. Instead, they faced fresh Mustang pilots who had the altitude advantage and superior aircraft. The 4th Fighter Group alone claimed 15 victories. More crucially, many German attacks on the bombers were disrupted before they could even get close. For American pilots, the P-51B represented a breakthrough in fighter design. Captain Donald Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group would later become one of the leading Mustang aces. In the midst of war, a pilot shared his first combat experience in the P-51 Mustang. This aircraft delivered all we hoped for. It had the speed to catch any German fighter and the maneuverability for dogfights. It also had the range to follow bombers anywhere. The cockpit of a P-51B was snug but well designed. The pilot sat behind an inline engine, giving excellent forward visibility. In contrast, the P-47 had a radial engine that limited the view. The bubble canopy of the P-51D improved visibility even further. Lieutenant Robert Powell from the 352nd Fighter Group recalled the tough physical demands. Spending 6 hours in a Mustang required oxygen above 10,000 feet. Your mouth would feel dry from the oxygen, and your back would ache from sitting on the parachute and dinghy pack. Your neck would hurt from constantly searching for enemy fighters. Still, we had the ability to complete the mission, and that made a significant difference. Seeing Mustangs over Berlin created an immediate crisis for the Luftwaffe's high command. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring initially refused to believe the reports. However, gun camera footage from German fighters showed P-51s flying over the capital. He reportedly said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." Although we lack primary sources to confirm this quote, it captures the shock experienced by German leaders. The tactical consequences were severe. They had based their air defense assumptions on the belief that their airspace was safe from fighters. Training fields, assembly areas, and aircraft factories were established in central Germany because they were thought to be secure. Now American fighters could strafe airfields near Prague, engage German fighters over Munich, and escort bombers to any target within German territory. Major Gunther Rohl, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, recognized this strategic shift. The Mustang not only extended the bombing offensive, but transformed it. We could no longer dictate when or where to fight. They brought the battle to us at their choosing. The Luftwaffe tried various tactical responses. They formed groups of heavily armed and armored Focke-Wulf 190s meant to penetrate fighter screens and attack bombers directly. However, these cumbersome assault fighters became easy targets for the nimble Mustangs. The Germans attempted mass assaults. Their entire group would attack simultaneously, but American fighters outnumbered and outperformed them. Between February 20th and February 25th in 1944, a period known as Big Week, the air war transformed significantly. The 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument aimed at disrupting German aircraft production. P-51 fighters provided ongoing escort for the bombers. Over 6 days, the Americans conducted 3,300 bomber sorties and 3,673 fighter sorties. They lost 226 bombers, but claimed they destroyed over 500 German fighters. More crucially, the Luftwaffe faced irreversible losses in pilots. The American strategy shifted from merely bombing targets to actively engaging in air combat. In January 1944, General James Doolittle, the commander of the 8th Air Force, issued new orders. Fighters were now to seek and destroy Luftwaffe planes whenever possible, instead of just escorting bombers. Captain John Godfrey from the 4th Fighter Group explained this change in tactics. "We would escort the bombers to their targets, but after they dropped their loads, we would look for action. We would dive low to attack airfields, catching German fighters as they landed or took off." The math of attrition heavily favored the Allies. In January 1944, the Luftwaffe lost 1,311 pilots. In February, the loss increased to 2,121. By March, it was 2,115. These losses included many experienced veteran pilots with significant combat backgrounds. While American losses were substantial, they could be replenished thanks to extensive training programs that produced 11,000 new pilots every month. The P-51 was not just a fighter with increased range, it demonstrated American industrial and technological prowess. The K-14 computing gun sight, introduced in late 1944, provided Mustang pilots a notable advantage in deflection shooting. This gyroscopic sight automatically calculated lead based on range and turn rate, significantly improving accuracy. Although the P-51's 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns were less powerful than German cannons, they had benefits in ammunition capacity and firing rate. A P-51 carried a total of 1,880 rounds, allowing nearly 30 seconds of continuous fire. In contrast, German fighters equipped with cannons typically carried enough ammunition for less than 10 seconds of shooting. In a prolonged dogfight, American pilots could make calculated shots while German pilots could not. Major Heinz Knoke, one of Germany's top aces with 220 victories, the Mustang was not just any fighter plane. It was a formidable weapon system. Every aspect of it was designed for combat. While we had impressive aircraft, none integrated all elements as effectively. Underneath the statistics was an unimaginable human tragedy. Young men from both sides, many barely out of their teens, fought intense battles 6 miles up in frigid temperatures of -50 degrees Fahrenheit. The lucky ones died instantly. Others suffered horrific burns, severe amputations from cannon fire, or faced agonizing deaths while trapped in burning parachutes. On March 8, 1944, Lieutenant William Wisner of the 352nd Fighter Group shot down a Bf-109 and saw its pilot bail out. The parachute opened, but the man was engulfed in flames. I watched him try to put out the fire on his flight suit as he descended. No one could assist him. German pilot Walter Schuck of JG-7 reflected on the changes in combat occurring in 1943. Initially, we felt like knights of the air, engaging bombers in what seemed a fair fight. But by 1944, we were relentlessly hunted. Mustangs would chase us back to our bases, circle overhead during our landings, and then attack. There was no safe haven. The mental pressure was unbearable. Luftwaffe pilots, once confident in 1943, became increasingly despondent by mid-1944. Letters home, censored by German authorities, revealed their growing hopelessness. One pilot wrote in April 1944, "We take off knowing most of us won't return. The Americans are everywhere, always above us, always with more fuel and ammunition." As spring turned to summer in 1944, the Mustang's extended range enabled a strategic campaign against the German war effort. Systematic destruction of oil production began. Synthetic oil plants at Lure-Pulitz and Brooks, previously beyond escort range, now faced regular precision strikes with full fighter support. The impact on the Luftwaffe was catastrophic. Aviation fuel production dropped from 175,000 tons in April 1944 to just 30,000 tons in July, and fell to only 10,000 tons in September. Training flights were reduced and ultimately ceased. New pilots arrived at combat units with as little as 50 hours of total flight time, while American pilots had accumulated between 300 and 400 hours. Obus Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-7, described the crisis. "We had the world's first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262, capable of reaching speeds up to 540 miles per hour, but we were still struggling. They struggled to provide fuel for combat missions. I watched in disbelief as dozens of these amazing aircraft remained unused while Mustangs flew freely in the sky." On June 6, 1944, the balance of air superiority changed completely. On D-Day, the Luftwaffe managed only 319 sorties over France, while the Allies conducted 14,674. Just 2 German fighters appeared over the invasion beaches. The Mustangs and other Allied fighters established such overwhelming control that the invasion proceeded with little resistance from German aircraft. A lieutenant named Josef Pips Prill, who was in charge of JG-26, flew one of those sorties alongside his wingman, Unteroffizier Heinz Knoke. After a solitary strafing run along Sword Beach, Prill later described the mission as a suicide mission disguised as duty. They survived only because Allied fighters were too stunned to respond to their single Focke-Wulf 190. The role of the Mustangs evolved from protecting bombers to active ground attack. P-51 pilots became adept at striking trains, using their .50 caliber guns to destroy locomotives. A single Mustang could carry 2 500-pound bombs or 10 5-inch rockets, making it a formidable ground attack aircraft. Captain Charles Chuck Yeager, who eventually broke the sound barrier, flew P-51s with the 357th Fighter Group. On October 12, 1944, he shot down 5 Messerschmitt Bf-109s in a single mission. However, he also spoke about the moral dilemmas they faced. Their focus shifted from defending bombers to targeting anything that moved. They would strafe trains, aware that civilians might be on board. This was total war. The Mustang allowed them to spread that war across Germany. In response, Germany introduced revolutionary jet fighters like the Messerschmitt Me-262 and the rocket-powered Heinkel He-162 Comet. The Me-262, capable of 540 miles per hour, was nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51D. In the hands of skilled pilots, it could slice through bomber formations and escape before the Mustangs could respond. Despite these technological advancements, they could not alter the outcome of the war. Adolf Galland, flying the Me-262 with JV-44 in 1945, shot down 7 aircraft but recognized the hopelessness of their situation. He likened it to a few tigers facing hundreds of wolves. For every Me-262, the Americans fielded 50 Mustangs. These Mustangs could hover over German airfields, attacking jets when they were most vulnerable during takeoff and landing. The jet engines from 1944 to 1945 were temperamental, requiring careful throttle management and longer runways. Mustang pilots began to take advantage of vulnerabilities. Lieutenant Urban Drew from the 361st Fighter Group, shot down two Messerschmitt Me-262 jets on October 7, 1944. With their fuel running low and preparing to land, the jets were easy targets for the diving Mustangs. By early 1945, Germany confronted a dire situation in air combat. The United States manufactured 15,486 P-51 Mustangs during the war, with about 8,000 deployed in Europe. In March 1945, the 8th Air Force operated 14 fighter groups, predominantly Mustangs, totaling over 1,000 aircraft. In contrast, the Luftwaffe could manage only 300 to 400 operational fighters daily across the entire German Reich. Fuel shortages kept many aircraft grounded. Pilot shortages meant that the few who did fly were often inexperienced teenagers. The kill ratios reflected this imbalance. By 1945, Mustang pilots celebrated 10 victories for every loss. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer, head of the 352nd Fighter Group, finished the war with 24 victories while flying Mustangs. He remarked, "By 1945, it wasn't combat, it was execution. We would find German airfields, circle above, and shoot down anyone trying to take off or land. The Mustang turned all of Germany into a combat zone." After the war, captured Luftwaffe pilots shared their thoughts on the Mustang's impact. General Adolf Galland noted in his memoirs, "The P-51 was perhaps the most significant fighter aircraft of World War II. He stated, "Before it came, we controlled the timing of air battles over Germany. After its arrival, we never regained the initiative." Major Heinz Knoke, with 33 victories, was more blunt. He said, "The Mustang killed the Luftwaffe, not the bomber offensive, not the invasion. It was the fighter capable of flying to Poland and back. We switched from predators to prey in just 3 months." Younger pilots who started to fight later in the war shared powerful experiences. They often flew their first missions with little training, facing seasoned American pilots in superior aircraft. One captured pilot recalled, "I flew my first combat mission in November 1944 with only 55 hours of flight time. On my third mission, I met Mustangs for the first time. They were everywhere. In that moment, I understood we lost not just the war, but control of the skies." The Mustang's impact extended beyond tactical victories. By allowing deep penetration raids with manageable losses, it enabled the losses. The systematic destruction of German industry was severe. By March 1945, production had dropped to only 10% of what was necessary. The transportation network lay in ruins, making it impossible to move troops, supplies, or raw materials. While aircraft production stayed high through relocation, it was useless without fuel or trained pilots. General Karl Spaatz, who commanded the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, stated that the P-51 was the essential weapon of the European air conflict. It supported daylight bombing missions, the invasion of Europe, and the gradual dismantling of German military power. Beyond its strategic significance, the P-51 altered the mindset of many individuals. German pilots who entered combat in 1943 with high confidence emerged as changed people if they survived. Many remembered the moments when they realized defeat was unavoidable, often linked to their first encounters with P-51 Mustangs deep within Germany. Some German pilots evolved from enemies to admirers. Many veterans of the Luftwaffe, after witnessing the material strength and humane treatment of American prisoners, began to question the propaganda they had been exposed to about their adversaries. The sharp contrast between Nazi propaganda and actual events severely impacted morale and ideology. The P-51 represented a turning point in fighter aircraft design, influencing aviation development for years to come. Its laminar-flow wing displayed the potential for considerable drag reduction. The blend of British engine technology with American airframe design set a standard for international collaboration that would continue through NATO and other alliances. The accomplishments of the Mustang in terms of range changed perceptions about fighter planes. Before the war, fighters were thought to be limited to short-range defense. The P-51 proved that fighters could operate as strategic assets capable of striking hundreds of miles from their bases. This concept affected everything from the F-86 Sabre in Korea to modern fighters that can be deployed globally with aerial refueling. The final statistics on the Mustang's impact are remarkable. A total of 15,486 Mustangs were produced. They were responsible for destroying 4,950 enemy aircraft in air combat over Europe and 4,131 enemy aircraft on the ground. They also took out 4,131 locomotives and completed 9,154 combat sorties, accumulating over 213,073 combat hours with 134,420 operational losses. The kill-to-loss ratio in air combat surpassed 11-1, which is an extraordinary feat in aerial warfare. However, the true effect extends beyond just the statistics. The Mustang dismantled the German resolve to fight, supported the invasion of Europe, and shortened the war by several months. The change from German laughter at unescorted bombers to a complete aerial incapacity occurred quickly. In October 1943, the German Luftwaffe dominated the skies over Germany. They easily shot down bombers. By March 1944, Mustangs were providing escort for those bombers heading to Berlin. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe was ineffective in combat. By April 1945, it had disappeared as a fighting force. This transformation did not unfold gradually. It represented a disaster. The Luftwaffe did not simply decline, it collapsed. The introduction of Mustangs over Germany initiated a string of defeats that made recovery impossible. Each lost pilot could not be easily replaced. Each destroyed aircraft hindered training efforts. Each successful escort mission motivated Allied leaders to strike further and more aggressively. The losses suffered by German pilots tell a vivid story. In 1943, they lost 2,967 pilots. In 1944, the loss was 12,373 pilots. From January to May in 1945, they lost 4,238 pilots. The average experience level of pilots dropped significantly. In 1943, pilots had over 250 flight hours before entering combat. By early 1944, that number decreased to 150 hours. In late 1944, it fell to 80 hours. By 1945, pilots possessed only 40 to 50 hours of flying time. The psychological impact of the Mustang may have been its greatest achievement. It shattered the belief in German technological dominance. It showcased American manufacturing's strength and demonstrated that democracy could produce superior weapons compared to dictatorship. German pilots who laughed at American bombers in 1943 were, by 1945, refusing to carry out suicide missions against formations defended by Mustangs. Young Luftwaffe pilots, taught Nazi ideology, felt confusion when confronting American supremacy. Everything they learned about racial superiority and German technical prowess was challenged by the sleek and powerful fighter that controlled their skies. In 1985, 40 years after the war ended, American and German pilots met at a reunion in San Antonio, Texas. Conversations at that event highlighted the long-lasting effects of the Mustang on both sides. Colonel Clarence Bud Anderson, who completed 116 combat missions in Mustangs and achieved 16.25 aerial victories, was among those discussing the impact. Victories were celebrated as he raised his glass, sitting across from Gar, Germany's third highest scoring ace. He spoke of the P-51 Mustang, the fighter that turned the tide in the air war. The fighters were excellent, and the pilots highly skilled. They fought for their homeland, yet the Mustang changed all that. Walter Schuck, who transitioned from FW-1900s to Me-262 jets, remarked, "In just 4 months, we went from mocking unescorted bombers to hiding from Mustangs. No military force ever faced such a sudden change." Former Luftwaffe General Johannes Steinhoff, scarred from his Me-262 crash in April 1945, recalled, "In 1943, we laughed at your bombers. We could not fathom that America could build a fighter with the range to escort them all the way to Berlin. The P-51 Mustang taught us how dangerous it is to underestimate our enemies." When did we realize the war was lost? It was that day in March 1944 when we saw Mustangs over Berlin. At that moment, every German pilot understood the truth. We had already lost. The shift from German pilots mocking unescorted American bombers to fearing Mustang fighters stands as one of the most important reversals in military history. In less than 6 months, from October 1943 to March 1944, the Luftwaffe fell from dominance to defeat, from predator to prey, and from confidence to despair. The P-51 Mustang was the catalyst for this transformation, but it symbolized something even larger. It highlighted American industrial strength, the democratic collaboration among allies, and the technological advancements spurred by necessity. German pilots, who believed that American democracy weakened their opponents, found a society capable of remarkable unity and production. The laughter of German pilots in October 1943 stemmed from an accurate assessment of technical limitations. No single-engine fighter had ever demonstrated the range required to escort bombers from England to Berlin and back. What they failed to anticipate was American ingenuity, the successful combination of American and British technology, and the industrial power to produce thousands of outstanding fighters in mere months. When Mustangs appeared over Berlin on March 4, 1944, the laughter ceased forever. Instead, there was a painful realization that everything German pilots believed about their enemies, their own superiority, and the outcome of the war was wrong. The P-51 Mustang did not just win the air war, it shattered illusions and dismantled confidence. This story breaks down the myths and shows that winning in war depends on industrial might, global teamwork, and democratic growth. The surviving German pilots never forgot this lesson. In their memoirs and interviews, they often mentioned the arrival of the P-51 Mustangs over Germany. That was the moment they understood the war was lost. It wasn't the Normandy invasion or the fall of Berlin that marked their defeat. It was when American fighter planes appeared in unexpected places, shielding bombers heading into the heart of the Reich with enough fuel to fight back. 79 years later, the P-51 Mustang is the ultimate symbol of American air superiority during World War II. This aircraft silenced laughter and ended the Reich's dominance in the skies. The German pilots who laughed in October 1943 realized by March 1944 that their laughter was misplaced. By May 1945, many of them had lost their lives, unable to ponder their overconfidence. This account reminds us of the dangers of underestimating enemies, the power of industrial democracy, and how one weapon system can change the course of history. The Mustang showed that in modern industrial warfare, bravery and skill alone don't guarantee victory. Success goes to those who can produce the most, train the best, and innovate the quickest. The transformation was complete and irreversible. The laughter faded into silence, and the P-51 Mustang made its mark across European skies, ending the Luftwaffe's control and the hopes of Nazi Germany for victory.